Today we're going to meet with Dr. Norris and Dr. Steck to find out how genetics and diet influence the development of type 1 diabetes.
So every year, DAISY participants have to fill out a diet survey. What specific elements is this study focusing on?
We're focusing on a lot of things, actually. Primarily, we've been looking at vitamin D, we've been looking at omega-3 fatty acids, milk intake, sugars intake. We're collecting the full diet because there may be other hypotheses out there that we might want to test in the future, so it's very important for us to get the full dietary assessment.
In 2007, DAISY found that omega-3 fatty acids were associated with the decrease of autoimmunity. Can you explain this result?
We found that kids who were eating fewer amounts of omega-3 fatty acids had a higher risk of autoimmunity. And this may be explained by the anti-inflammatory properties of omega-3 fatty acids. And if inflammation is part of the process that leads you from being healthy to diabetes, taking in an anti-inflammatory thing in your diet may be important and prevent the disease in the future.
The hygiene hypothesis is a theory thought to be associated with the increase of type 1 diabetes. Would you explain this hypothesis?
The hygiene hypothesis proposes that early exposure to germs or other certain infections may actually help train the immune system and actually may help it understand when not to overreact. The idea is that the cleaner environments in today's society is actually resulting in a higher incidence of immune-related diseases such as type 1 diabetes and asthma because we're not being exposed to all these training events, germs and infections like we were in the past.
DAISY recently published an interesting association between daycare and breastfeeding and risk for type 1 diabetes. Would you explain how daycare and breastfeeding were linked?
We looked at daycare in DAISY because it's an interesting variable. It could represent exposure to all these germs and certain infections that might lead to the training of the immune system, but it also could lead to the exposure of other infections that have been related to increased risk of diabetes. So it could either be good or bad. And so we were interested in seeing what it showed in DAISY. And what we found is that if we looked at attendance at daycare before the age of 2, there was no difference in risk of diabetes. But if we factored in how long a child had been breastfed, what we found is that as the kids who were breastfed longer, actually we started to see the more protective effect of daycare. So again, daycare seemed to be protective for diabetes in the kids who were breastfed a longer period of time. So what does this mean? Well, it could actually represent part of the hygiene hypothesis and part of the infection hypothesis, where breastfeeding allows you to counteract some of the bad infections that may lead to diabetes, while you're able to benefit from the other germs and infections that you get at daycare that lead to sort of that hygiene hypothesis, meaning that it might be a good thing. So you might get the best of both worlds there.
So DAISY has been looking at gene-environment interactions. Can you explain what this is and why it's important?
So the DAISY study has been looking at the potential causes of islet autoimmunity, which is the development of diabetes antibodies, and type 1 diabetes. We know that there are genetic factors, such as the HLA genes, that predispose people to type 1 diabetes. However, not everyone with those high-risk HLA genes actually goes on and develops type 1 diabetes. And the DAISY study has been analyzing such environmental factors, including what we eat, the germs we're exposed to, as well as the bacteria normally present in our intestines. And for example, DAISY has found that both early and late introduction of cereal can increase the risk of islet autoimmunity. On the other hand, infections with viruses, for example, enteroviruses, may also play a role.
DNA is found in the nucleus of your cells. DNA is made up of paired molecules called nucleotides or bases. Segments of these paired bases are called genes. A SNP, or a single nucleotide polymorphism, is a single base difference on a strand of DNA. The specific arrangement of bases within each gene tells your body what proteins to make, which in turn codes for your specific traits. The presence of a specific SNP in a person could mean that they are at a higher risk for a disease like type 1 diabetes.
Has DAISY found any additional genes that are linked to autoimmunity or the development of type 1 diabetes?
Beside the contribution of HLA genes to type 1 diabetes, which are the genes that did qualify you for the DAISY study, several non-HLA genes have been associated with type 1 diabetes. And these include small genetic changes such as single nucleotide polymorphism called SNPs. And those SNPs are basically a single change on a single strand of DNA. These small genetic changes can lead to modification in the protein made, and altered protein will then influence the way your body functions, can change the way your body basically functions. This would be similar, for example, to the amount of baking powder you put in a cake. This might seem insignificant, but can have major effects on how your cake turns out in the end. So DAISY has found several SNPs, so single nucleotide polymorphism, associated with both development of islet autoimmunity and then progression to type 1 diabetes. Further research into those small genetic changes could help scientists find the potential causes of type 1 diabetes.
That's the end of part 2. Please join us for part 3, where we'll learn about DAISY's future directions and treatment options for people with type 1 diabetes.